Let me introduce you to the biggest argument against women in ministry, the 12 disciples. But Jesus only chose 12 male disciples. If he wanted women, he would have chose women. Jesus was very strategic at what he was doing, and he was reaching Israel. And Jesus is predicting end-time imagery by having 12. The Essenes did this too. They had 12 who were special leaders. And what is it? Well, come on, if you were a Jew, you'd know 12, the 12 tribes. And Jesus is answering the 12 tribes. And the blessings are going to come. In fact, he says this very well. He's very, very clearly. He says, you 12 will be with those 12. You'll be judging the 12 tribes of Israel. It's directly connected. When he's going to these first century Jews, he comes in this pattern that they'll accept. This is like a patriarchal pattern. And they're not from the 12 tribes. They're from Galilee, which is really on the side of maybe not poking fun, but kind of having some fun with the whole mentality behind we're the special elect and chosen. And here he comes with these Galileans, most if not all of them being from outside of Judea. And when he called his disciples to them, the scripture tells us he apostled them. He sent them out. Okay? I know there's some people that make this big deal. There is only 12 apostles. There will only ever be 12 apostles. There will never be more 12 than 12 apostles. Well, okay, maybe to first century Judea. But this was not the only mission. This was Jesus' mission. This was the first. This is baby steps. This isn't the big deal. These guys are in training. They are going only to Israel. No place else. That is the mission. Now, what we see later is that there is a mission that goes to another location. Who goes there? Is it 12? No. This is not the pattern that we use. We see the Spirit calls for Paul and Barnabas to go out. Minister over here. To another group, it's different ones. To Rome, the mission to Rome, who does Paul send? Phoebe. A woman. To spearhead his mission from into Rome and on to Spain. Why? Because that culture would receive a woman that was in business, a woman that was respectable. It wasn't going to happen in Israel. And I want you to see something else that he's doing. He's not just accidentally choosing who he chose. He did not choose shepherds. The great shepherd, as far as we know, of all the occupations mentioned, shepherds aren't one of them. That's the first ones to be announced to that the baby was born. But it would really be tough to pull shepherds away from their flocks for this ministry. Furthermore, that was one of the lowest occupations you could have, and people wouldn't respect shepherds. Do you realize that the disciples Jesus chose, I want you to understand how well thought out this is. I know we think it's random. And I know we're this panic-stricken church that says, we think we've got to be the panic-stricken church that, anybody, please come to our church. That is not how Jesus did it. Because, and he taught his disciples to do it this way. He says, pick you the right ones. What he picked was the top 10% of the nation. At least I think of the 6 different occupations we have listed among the apostles, they were in the top 10 percentile. Not that fishermen were the upper crust of society. It was a stinky occupation. Anybody who was handling an animal that was on its way out, that was dying, was unclean. It wasn't the cleanest occupation. But it was, when I say it's a top 10%, it's because they were free business owners. Most people were indentured or working for the big man somewhere. Okay? And so he picked people with trades that they could walk away from. He picked people that would have some influence in society. Somebody that would garner some respect. He had everybody known to man following him, but the ones that he picked were those that could penetrate their culture, that could get somewhere in their community and somebody would listen to him. And as much as he loved women and he celebrated them, and he even got the little old lady that was healed to talk in front of a crowd of thousands or however big the multitude was, he gave her first speaking engagement. In Samaria, he let the woman go back to town and preach to them. They listened to a woman there. But in some areas, it was so intense that if a woman went and spoke, they would have stoned her for talking in public. Husbands and wives weren't even supposed to speak in public. According to some historians, it was a little different time than we've got right now. Okay? So the people that say, well, Jesus chose 12 disciples, I just say that's not all he chose. Not that fishermen were the upper crust of society. It was a stinky occupation. Anybody who was handling an animal that was on its way out, that was dying, was unclean. It wasn't the cleanest occupation. But it was, when I say it's a top 10%, it's because they were free business owners. Most people were indentured or working for the big man somewhere. Okay? And so he picked people with trades that they could walk away from. And some people say, well, Paul was the 12th apostle. Have you ever heard that? Matthias was chosen, but Paul should have been if they just waited. Paul's mission wasn't to Israel. They understood that they had to have 12 key leaders to minister to Israel. But outside of there, they picked 7 when they're dealing with the Hellenistic Jews. And again, we don't have all the psychology behind the choices that he made, but these are glimpses that we can have. And don't make it a hard and fast rule that every church has to have 12 leaders. We need the 12 tribes of Neosho represented. We don't have to do it that way. The church in Antioch, I think they had 5 leaders. So there's no solid way of doing it. It's what works in a given culture. If we were doing outreach into some of those African cultures that are matriarchal, you'd probably do better to have a woman preacher to reach into those communities because they'll all listen to grandma. Okay, and there's some of those cultures in the United States too. But if you're reaching Italy, you probably better get the big daddy if you're going to influence the family. You see, so work with the culture. You don't have to go and try and reinvent the culture. You just need to know what you're working with and who can work where. There's some places I can't go because I'm a white male. They won't listen to me. Okay, on a mission field, I wanted to go out and do outreach. They were going out into the community, going to the projects to reach these folks. And I said, I want to go. And they're like, and they're picking everybody and get ready to go. And, hey, who am I going with? And finally, the missionary's daughter comes over and says, you can't go. I'm like, why? They see you come to the door, they won't answer it. I'm like, that's not cool. But in that culture, I was of no help. So I got my feelings hurt, and I decided I'd never do anything for God again. They rejected me. No, you just got to understand. Culture is a thing. And I know I don't pander to culture and just say, well, we're going to let the culture be whatever it is. We're not going that extreme. Well, that's what they do. Just let them do it. We're not going there. But we got to understand what we're working with if we're going to get them to a certain point. And some of it, we're just going to let it go. Right. If they want to keep fishing, if they want to keep raising sheep, that's fine. Yeah. If they want to have church on Saturday, I don't care. We'll have church on Saturday. Those are cultural things. We don't have to change all that. But what we've got to fix is what's at the core. Okay. Right. So Jesus deliberately takes 18 months developing this team. Not just the 12. From his disciples, he chose 12. Right. There's women being developed. Right. Okay? Mary and Martha, Joanna, yes. They're sitting at his feet. That means they're being trained as disciples. Right. And we find that they do great works for the Lord because later we see where they risk their necks for the sake of the gospel. Some of the women were imprisoned for the sake of the gospel. They weren't just back there cooking and baking. They got arrested probably because they were preaching the gospel. They were making converts. Yeah. Had to be something along those lines. They weren't just in the habit of arresting women. Right. That's right. Even today. I mean, what is Neosho? I think it's 4-1, the number of men to women that are incarcerated. Oh, yeah. Okay? It's not very common for women to be the ones getting in trouble. So when you got Christian women getting arrested, they had to be pretty active.